Well, for those of you who've already joined us on the webinar, good morning and welcome. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate that you have chosen to spend your time with us today on this virtual webinar. I hope you've all been enjoying level 1, getting out and about. We made it, but I guess if there's one thing we can hang on to from our experience in lockdown, it's definitely being able to connect with each other online and to set up regular accessible webinars like these ones so that we can all learn and engage from one another wherever we are. So long may that continue. My name is Sam Williamson. I'm a geospatial advisor at Eagle Technology Group, and I'm filling in today for my good friend Scott Campbell, head of GIS technology at Eagle, who unfortunately couldn't make it today. But for those of you who don't know Eagle Technology, we are the official Esri distributor here in New Zealand, supporting our users of the ArcGIS platform here and across the South Pacific. And we've been asked by Zag to co-present this webinar today about bringing information, systems, and people together. And it's this idea of geo-enabling or bringing location-based capabilities to enterprise systems. And that idea isn't necessarily new, but what is new is the latest joint work that we've done through an alliance between Esri and their partner SAP. A vast amount of work has been done together on integration patterns and technology, so that it's easier to integrate between our respective technologies, and also we think making the end product more valuable, bringing GIS capabilities and data into the heart of ERP and making the valuable ERP data accessible through GIS applications. What is also very new is that we're excited to say that Zag are Esri's newest partner, making them quite unique in New Zealand by having both Esri and SAP practices in-house. And so to take you through this topic that we're going to go through today, we're drawing upon a good depth of experience from colleagues who are joining me today, who many of you will know. First of all, we've got Barry Hodges, who is a data platform architect from SAP here in New Zealand, and Mati Sekula, the head of spatial at Zag. And I've known Barry and Mati for a few years now, and it's great to be with them online today and talk about the powerful combination of ERP and GIS. Next slide, please, Alex. So today, as far as combining Esri's GIS and SAP's ERP technology goes, we want to share with you the latest developments and key benefits and some real-world examples from New Zealand and across the world. But we also recognise that today's audience comes from across the spectrum of exposure to both of these different technologies. And so we want to take a few minutes up front to cover off the basics of both Esri's GIS and SAP's ERP. And so we do apologise, as this is covering ground which some of you are undoubtedly already very familiar with. But we do want to make sure that we are catering for different backgrounds and levels of technology familiarity, as well as providing a bit of a recap or update for others. We are planning to have time for questions at the end, so please do send through any questions in the chat window in the Zoom application. And a recording of the webinar will also be made available online afterwards. And if you weren't aware, the team here have presented this webinar a couple of times over the past 2 weeks, but with a particular focus and relevance to the public sector and the utility sector. And they included case studies relevant to those groups. And so while the vast majority of the content in those webinars is also covered today, you may be interested in viewing those recordings, which are available online as well. So just go through this slide, please, Alex. So just so we are all on the same page, let me provide some background on the GIS side of things. So what is GIS? GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, is a digital mapping and analytics technology. And ArcGIS in particular is the world's leading mapping and analytics platform. We often use computers and technology to create a digital representation of what exists in the real world, whether it's money, people, buildings, weather, social connections, workflows, processes, or assets. And the term digital twin is often used now to describe that. And the GIS is centered upon a digital representation of things which exist in the real world and which can be represented spatially using a location. And everything from human or physical geography to people, assets, jobs, operational boundaries, weather information, or live road statuses, all of these data sets can be made up as layers or groups of layers that can be brought together in a map. And these digital maps, just like their paper versions, are used to answer so many different questions. And the questions which you'll have will determine which of those layers are to be included in your digital maps. And you can think in each of those maps as an individual information product, supporting different use cases, but which often use shared layers of that same data. And we'll come on to the sources of data for those layers shortly. But of course, having layers driven from some of your organization's most valuable information, including both of your GIS and your ERP, allows you to best represent the entities in the real world, as well as to fully model the business processes as a single workflow or transaction rather than as disjointed workflows and separate information silos. And then when you add in analytics, going beyond simply visualizing this data and using the real power of computers to understand the relationships, patterns, and trends in these layers of data, these are information points which are connected by nothing other than its location. And we know, however, that in the real world, location is a very powerful element in understanding cause and effect, demand and supply, and to model behavior over space and time. Next slide, please, Alex. And so GIS can be applied in many different ways. And below we have summarized the main patterns of use which we have seen locally and global amongst GIS users. And the obvious one is, of course, mapping and visualization. Visually bringing together all of those layers of information, allowing your very powerful brain to do the work of understanding what that means. Sometimes just seeing the data on a map is one of the most powerful things you can do. A picture paints 1,000 words. In order to do this mapping effectively, though, there needs to be a highly efficient means of storing and accessing such data and allowing the retrieval of just the information needed to answer the question. And in that area of selecting the data from potential national or global data sets. And for an enterprise, ideally, that is the single source of truth. And SAP's HANA is actually set up to store this in a native spatial format from inside a HANA geodatabase. Now, the biggest growth that I've seen in the number of professional GIS users in the last couple of years has been in the area of field mobility, using apps such as ArcGIS Collector to take data into and out of the field, both offline and online. And whether you're tracking your field crews for health and safety, assigning and tracking job statuses as part of work order management, or using the apps for rapid online or offline field inspections. And we recently saw the rapid deployment out of this capability to about 1,000 field crews to support health and safety, specifically for COVID-19 contact tracing when we come out of level 4. Now, many New Zealand organisations are using ArcGIS to monitor information in real time from various live sources. IoT sensors, SCADA systems, live weather feeds, data coming from staff with field apps, or even publicly reported information. All this information is coming in, which represents changing locations or states, or a combination of both, often very rapidly. And collectively, this monitoring allows live GIS layers to be brought into the core enterprise data stores and used for alerting or analysis. And increasingly here in New Zealand, we do have plug and play capabilities for ingesting standard IoT data sources. So analytics is actually going beyond mapping and going deeper into understanding the patterns, trends, and underlying connections in your data, all surfaced through this location-based platform. And we'll talk about more of this shortly. Specific tools have been developed on top of ArcGIS to allow design and planning of everything from a building or a facility to a city or a national network of assets. And this design pattern is particularly powerful when combined with analytics to understand the behavior of proposed design under different scenarios, like how will my assets perform given different conditions, or what will the impact of a council rezoning be on my own existing network. Decision support. Well, throughout the response to COVID-19 globally, we've actually seen organizations bring together data layers and other live feeds in simple data-driven dashboards, allowing decision makers to quickly see the key derived metrics and how they relate to specific locations. And this use case mirrors how we've actually seen dashboards being used over the past 4 or so years to gain real-time views of assets or business performance with respect to their locations. Now, just quickly, the last 2 patterns we see are really about making information available to others. Constituent engagement, both sharing, collaboration, is all about breaking down silos and securely sharing GIS layers between teams, departments, organizations, and regions. And sharing and collaboration, the pattern of GIS is key to that. And here in New Zealand, we see a great deal of sharing happening between organisations collaborating on a specific initiative, whether it's a local emergency where local authorities, road owners such as NZTA, are bringing together their own data alongside other sources like weather, and being able to make a real difference in how quickly and effectively each corresponding organisation can respond. Can we go to the next slide, please, Alex? So I mentioned there one of the patterns, spatial analytics, and we don't just think of that as a pattern alone, but due to its broad set of applications, it's almost its own language. At its heart is spatial analytics forms a set of sophisticated algorithms designed to make the most of computer processing in large, potentially complex data sets. And there are hundreds of different algorithms that can be run, but these can be broadly grouped by the types of questions they answer. And once again, are really core to a GIS system. From simple questions of understanding where something is located, where are my offices or stores, where is my supply chain, where are my customers, where is the good or bad weather affecting them, through to the tasks of identifying patterns and relationships between data points or data sets. Where are the vulnerabilities on my delivery routes? Through to using such analytical tools to find relationships to identify optimal uses of resources, and on to predicting future states or outcomes, and what is the likely outcome of this action. And as we'll see here shortly, there are significant opportunities in combining these analytical tools with valuable ERP data and powerful data and processing capabilities. Next slide, please, Alex. So powering these capabilities is a combination of data layers, as I explained. And traditionally, these layers represent your own enterprise information, both from your geodatabase or ArcGIS data stores, or from wider enterprise systems such as SAP ERP information. However, there recently has been an explosion of other ready-to-use information sources shared as web accessible services, including securely shared layers representing data from other organizations and layers representing publicly available authoritative data. This last group is an amazing resource, and at Eagle, we've been working really hard with New Zealand government and other sources to provide over 70 New Zealand specific layers ranging from high resolution imagery to geology through to demographic information from census to elevation data. And we call this collection of data layers the ArcGIS Living Atlas. And it's curated by us, but it's populated by authoritative public organizations as well as some private sources. Next slide, please, Alex. So how does all this stuff come together? So the capabilities and analytics we looked at earlier are combined with the public, private, and enterprise data to provide configurable applications that are actually used by the organizations. And the applications are designed to be configured and deployed to meet the various needs of the organization's workforce or stakeholders. And as such, they range from desktop apps for the GIS professional through to smartphone apps for field workers or contractors, and web applications for analysts or planners. There's an app for everyone. They connect with the C-suite through data-driven live dashboards and engage public audiences with web apps for two-way trusted crowdsourcing, as well as open data and open insights initiatives. It's really about choosing the right tool for the right person or job. All connected though, this is really important, to the same core sources of data. Now you'll see how these apps complement those of SAP shortly, as well as how they can be integrated to create a seamless flow of information, seamless as possible. Now on that note, I'd like to pass over now to SAP's Barry Hodges to take us through what is ERP and how does that relate to geospatial. Over to you, Barry.
Cool, thanks very much, Sam, for that really good introduction to GIS. I know for the people on the call that are more ERP centric, that was a really helpful level set. Obviously a lot of it's quite intuitive, but when you see the complexity that has to be managed there, it's pretty sophisticated and impressive stuff. But I think it's fair that if we're going to do that 101 on GIS, it's probably fair that we quickly just do one on ERP as well. Just really more for the benefit of those that spend their days working in the spatial arena, but they're aware of the ERP system in the business. I mean, if you know anything about your organization and how it runs, you're already going to understand the basics of an ERP system. You're going to be aware of the fact there's a finance department, a team that go out and do procurement on behalf of the business, the HR team, and of course you've got a bunch of folk that look after the frontline services of the organization. So simply put, in the same way, I guess, that GIS systems exist to digitize the physical world, ERP systems, they exist to digitize business processes, the things that the HR team, the finance team, and so forth are responsible for. I guess we can think of ERP as a kind of a digital twin of the business, although we frequently find, and I guess this is where I get into interesting conversations with a lot of our customers, we are missing the where of the business event that we are recording in the SAP platform. And this is really, of course, the key. What we're trying to cover today is how do we close the gap that exists frequently between business data and spatial data, because at the end of the day, it's more often than not that those two data sets are one and the same. It's just you have to go to two different places to actually get the full picture. So if I was to put in one sentence what an ERP is, that's here on this page, right? It's a system that optimizes the flow of information, materials, and cash in an organization. So we could talk about this in more detail for ages if we really wanted to, but fairly simply, if we were to diagrammatically portray this in a simplified view, in the next slide, if we can jump to that, I'll explain what I'm talking about at a very simple level. All organizations exist to provide some form of service or product, of course, and there on the left we have the services that you might bring together from various suppliers and create a product. So we assemble material. Now, I know on the call we've got both public sector and private sector organizations. So that could be a physical asset, or it could be a human resource. It could be something of both nature that we're thinking about there. But at the end of the day, you're going to assemble those and you're going to put them together and make them available to the consumer in the form of services. So as a process, we obviously build the product and that moves into inventory. It's got a financial cost to acquire and we sell it. So there might be some invoicing at the end of the day as well. And whether it's the end user that pays or some government agency, it matters not really. The point is that there has to be a financial transaction recorded. And of course, a lot of what we're talking about here has got a physical attribute attached to it. Where is the asset? Where are the consumers? What's the intersection of the two? So ERP is recording all of these various pieces as they move through the organization and touch often HR systems, finance systems, customer, supply chain. It's quite a complex world which we get into if we start to unpack the detail. And if we go to the next slide, we get a bit of an idea of the sort of objective that we're trying to fulfill here, in the sense that on the right are those classic systems that SAP is known for around the HR management, customer finance, and so on. And recently we acquired a company called Qualtrics, where we are trying to now measure what the business is doing out in the field in terms of impression. So what is the customer experience as they interface with the services that you as an organization are providing? What are your products like? But it's not just the customer experience we care about. It's of course going to be suppliers. What is their experience working with your organization? And of course, we think about the employees in the business as well. So there are a lot of stakeholders involved. And if we're constantly looking to improve our service, we need to measure all points. Now in the middle though is the glue that brings all of this world together, the interfacing between all of these various silo applications, line of business applications, and then the industry solutions that SAP provides. And in that regard, we have integration technologies and of course data management technologies and so on. And this is where we see the spatial integrations coming into play, bringing in the GIS technologies at the grassroots level to make all of this data that we want to connect and get that 360-degree view of the world going. And we do that through this interfacing intelligence business technology platform in the center there. Now, if we go to the next slide, we get a bit of a practical view of this in the sense of the different personas that we're going to be dealing with in an organization. On the left are the types of applications that those that work in the spatial world are going to be predominantly using. And Sam has already walked us through some of these in the use cases which we would typically apply them to. But in many cases, the data that's been rendered in these applications has its master data and a number of its attribute data stored inside a business application like an SAP system, so enterprise asset management systems and so on, or customer data. So we want to find a way to bring the data from the SAP world, which is the master of that data, into the arena of the spatial user and find a way to push that data into their format. Equally, we think about the users on the right, who are the SAP business users, who are thinking about where their customers are, where those assets are that they are in control of. They need to know where that information is spatially. If you're going to set up a maintenance work order, whereabouts are those various maintenance workers going to go? What's the optimal way to send them? So we need to bring in a spatial element to this type of analysis. So at the end of the day, the key that we're trying to resolve here is this integration. So at the bottom are really the two things we're most interested in here. How do we share business data in a spatial context, and how do we bring spatial information into a business context? And it's the union of these two worlds which we're really trying to focus in on here. So we can go to the next slide and we'll have a look at some use cases that we're kind of trying to solve. And there's many, and most of the ones on here are predominantly focused around the predominant area that we see spatial kind of leaning, and that's in public sector and utilities. But of course, not exclusive to these industries. We see it in retail, we see it in education. There's many areas, and you would argue that just about every single business process has a spatial element attached to it. But in this particular slide here, we're seeing, for example, if you're a public sector organization, you're wanting to know where your consumers are in relation to the services that you're providing. If you're a utility, you're very much interested in the physical assets in the field and whether or not they're working as designed. But that is often a combination of where the asset is in addition to the master data you're maintaining on it. So plenty of examples there that we're going to actually go into a little bit more detail on some customer examples shortly when Mati just provides some customer stories. But the SAP Esri relationship has been in play for a long time. So if we can go to the next slide, and we'll just have a look at how SAP has evolved its relationship with Esri over the last almost 20 years, really. Began in the late 90s, where BW was the business warehouse that SAP has started to include integrations into Esri. And as you can see, there's plenty of dots there along the way where we've done further integrations across many aspects of the application stack. Some of them are directly into the application tier. And lately, the majority of the effort has been focused on the data tier, bringing the integrations together at a more database-centric level. So we've got, I guess, more pervasive capabilities where that union of business data and spatial data can extend beyond just the SAP and Esri domain in their classic sense. And what we notice there at the top there is HANA, SAP's in-memory platform on which we build the SAP application stack, has now been certified as a geodatabase, which is pretty important from our point of view because it means that we can optimize for the spatial query alongside optimizing for the business process. And as I said, these happen in tandem. You can see there that the partnership has been pretty strong, and in 2018, SAP awarded Esri a partner award there as a pinnacle partner. So very much a very, very tier one partnership for SAP to be working alongside Esri, and it's great to see the Eagle and Zag team on the call today to be supporting that here locally in New Zealand. I just want to now go down into what are we talking about. HANA's obviously on the slide, and we talk about HANA a lot. It's important we just have a really quick recap on HANA and its role in this whole architecture. So if we go to the next slide, and I'll briefly just talk about what is HANA, for those of you who have not really dived into the detail. It is first and foremost what we call a multimodal platform. And by that we mean we bring together with the data that we store in it, all of the typical capabilities that we see customers wanting to do from an analytical point of view. So you've got your standard transaction processing, analytical processing capabilities, and the cool thing there is that we can run them together. But we add to that the ability to do spatial analysis and understand complex text data and streaming data and so forth. And the point is, we see in a lot of cases business problems being a combination of these engines having to be brought in to run. So having got that platform, we can then execute many different scenarios. And as you can see on top, of course, it's the bedrock on which SAP builds its applications, but also we provide the Esri geodatabase capability and use this platform to support both SAP and non-SAP use cases. So we see it very much as the core of what we're trying to do to bring both the Esri world together, the SAP world, and build out new applications. To give you an example, just to go to the next slide, really simple one here. This is a customer that we're working with in the Northern Hemisphere, and what they wanted to do was understand where they should trim vegetation in relation to their assets. So this was bringing in data from their GIS platform, bringing in asset master data from the SAP platform, and also bringing in some interesting other data sets like video imagery and document processes to effectively mine all of that and come up with an optimal plan on how they should actually manage their vegetation. But it was a union of the physical world and the business world to get this job done. So this is just a really simple example of the multimodal requirements to solve a given business problem, not just one piece. So my final slide, if we go to it, is really just to look quickly at what are the primary benefit areas that we see for the different groups that deal with data in this arena. And of course, if you're a GIS person, and your job involves bringing business data into the architecture to make it available to the GIS consumer, then you're going to eliminate a lot of the heavy lifting of preparing that data and getting it ready for consumption. We can build these integrations much more quickly, and therefore you become more agile. And therefore the data that people are looking at is real time and current, so it's more relevant. From a business perspective, this is the ERP user now looking at spatial data. Their information is much greatly enriched. Sam talked about a picture's worth 1,000 words, and we very much are seeing that we want to move past just forms and tables to actually seeing what that data looks like when it's dropped into a physical world, a three-dimensional world, if we want it that way. So that is really the key there for the business users, give them much better insights into their decisions. And finally, of course, IT benefit, because a lot of the redundancy that we see in organizations where data is having to be copied from one system to another is removed. And they are effectively just providing an integrated platform off of which the business can now look at the data in very new and exciting ways. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Matti, who's going to now give us a couple of customer examples and give you a bit more technical detail on how these technologies come together. So Matti, over to you, mate.
Thanks, Barry. Next slide, please. Okay, so here are a couple of examples from the specifically for from the agriculture and the kind of food industry globally. So these 5 customers here are SAP and Esri customers who have integrated SAP and Esri technology together to produce to provide a specific types of solutions. So quite a typical one is all kind of real-time situational awareness type of thing. So real-time data is becoming more pervasive, becoming more available. I will talk a little bit about that from an SAP spatial perspective later on one of the slides. But US is there's a lot of systems like that already in place. Sugarcane, biotechnology, so starting to bring in the kind of advanced analytics and things like that you can bring into the things. Sustainable agriculture and anything sustainable really is becoming mainstream. Supply chain management, scalable, unified platform. So these examples here, the ones with a little video in there, when you get, if you download a copy of this presentation, you can click on the video and it will actually launch the site and show you a little bit more about what those specifically do. Next slide, please. Or if you dive into other industries like transport industry, so air traffic management, or insurance like wildlife prediction, risk mitigation, or healthcare like intelligent healthcare management. There's a whole lot of different areas where you can use SAP and Esri together. On the right hand side, there's a couple of things that we've been playing with. So we have a product called Publlo, which is an SAP an Esri based spatial mobile field tool, allows you to do asset work at the field. We've been playing with some of our customers on some of the augmented reality, mixed reality demos on showing your assets on the ground. And like Sam mentioned, digital twins are becoming really important. So especially when assets are underground, you can't see them, how to actually view them easily. Mapping environment and 3D is actually a really neat way of doing that. I'll talk to you a little bit about artificial intelligence and machine learning stuff that we've been playing with, just to show you how you integrate spatial with other technologies. Next slide, please. So this is a proof of concept that we did for one of our retail customers on one of the potential things that you could do for social distancing and measuring and things like that. So the idea was to have something in place there that allows people coming to pick up stock from retailer, for the retailer to get informed first of all that the person has arrived and prepare it for them, and then make the whole process as easy as possible and record it at the same time. We did a proof of concept on this. It kind of, we call it Zag Pickup. It fell through the cracks a little bit because there's a whole lot of QR code placed social distancing now available that governments provides, etc. But it was an interesting thing to do. We basically took the SAP's Hybris product and integrated it with spatial there, GPS coordinates, that kind of geofence checking around sites, stuff like that. Next one, please. And the next one is an more interesting one. So this is actually a very sophisticated, what happened there? A very sophisticated AI machine learning thing where we were playing with the cameras and see whether we could start recognizing people in factories talking to each other closer than 2 meters for more than 5 minutes. So we had basically cameras positioned. The idea was we have cameras positioned in strategic places, and then people's mobile devices sending indoor GPS coordinates, which were used. So the indoor GPS itself isn't accurate enough for us to say where somebody is to do a 2 meter check, but the cameras together with the GPS coordinates can actually give us a measured detail on where people are. So this was all about automation of that and starting to tell people that, hey, sorry guys, you've been close to each other for over 5 minutes now. That's not the rules are you need to socially distance and all that. Of course, now we're in level 1, so we don't have to care for that much anymore. But I suppose the pointer here is that this is how you can use spatial together with other technologies and join it back to the systems there to start looking at what kind of value that can give. Okay, next slide, please. So, if we look at just in New Zealand, what are the possibilities here? So, what we're talking here is SAP, the organizations who have SAP and Esri in place so that we can actually start tying those together and come up with a solution that enables the spatial within your ERP suite. So looking across the sectors, all of these sectors have customers who or organizations in New Zealand who have that in place. Actually, if you click once, actually there is over 100 of these in New Zealand that we know of. There's probably more, but just for that, there is a lot of potential in New Zealand to start marrying these technology suites together. Next one, please. So that's basically, as Sam mentioned, we are an Esri partner, brand new one. Zach is an Esri partner, brand new one. We have a core team there with highly experienced specialists. All of us are 15 plus. It's 5 of us now. All of us are 15 plus years of spatial experience. Some of us, like myself, getting a bit more age. I'm 25 years. I have a guy who's 30 years GIS expertise. So the core team there can advise and mentor and design and cover all these kind of different roles there. But the key for Zach is that our other teams, the technologies team and e-commerce team who are developers, analytics team who are BI specialists, product development team who maintain our BlueWorks product and some of the other ones we're working on, cloud and basis teams who set up our platforms, whether they are on-prem or Azure or AWS or Google Cloud, and testing team who do all the testing for our systems in integration. All of these teams have already people who are spatially aware. And what we're doing right now, they are all SAP aware. Zach's been in SAP since '96. We understand SAP really well. But these guys we are now getting people trained and certified on these different teams, at least 2 people per team to start with. So that means that we already have a growing team of 15 plus in place there who can actually help on integrating and enabling spatial and within SAP solutions. Next, please. So looking at what does it actually mean? So this is similar to Barry's slide there where he was showing kind of how and where these come from. So in my slide stack there, we have SAP on the left, Esri on the right. Click once, please. There are already a lot of SAP products that integrate spatial, integrate Esri. Whether it's real estate management or enterprise asset management or HANA apps, analytics, cloud, basically lots of it already has spatial enabled there. Click again. This enablement is done by these blue boxes here. So these are the various ways that SAP products can access spatial capability. Next one, please. On the other hand, in the Esri side of the fence, we want Esri products to be able to view and use the information, the knowledge, the rules, the processes, workflows from the SAP suite. So there are lots of different enablements and integration available there that we can use. And HANA being Esri geodatabase is one of those key things. So the fact that it means we have one source of truth that we can use across the board. And basically all the data coming from one place, we gain huge efficiencies for people not having to synchronize things together, things like that. However, if you don't have HANA, that still works. There's a web services tier and APIs on both suites that allow us to merge these things together if you're using some other spatial geodatabase there. Click again. So Esri, of course, enables the spatial use and these integration links by the blue boxes on the right-hand side, so different types of ways. Next, please. So if we look at a little bit more about how this works in practice. So let's say you did have a HANA database there. The key here is that HANA, to support spatial, you need either HANA Enterprise or HANA Standard with Graph. And there are lots of things around how that can be done. But click once. We can bring data to these via built-in standards-based frameworks and tools. Whether that data is coming from relational databases like your Oracle, DB2s, all these are all spatial databases that we can bring the data in via FME type of tools, or open source kind of stuff from in the left there, so PostGIS, MySQL, spatial, whole lot of different things using GDAL, things like that, or even from other GIS systems. So here Esri, of course, Luciad, Hexagon, there's a whole lot of different ones there, OGC based tools, Open Geospatial Consortium standards based tools to load stuff, or open source tools like that. Click again. We can then enable this via Esri. Like I said, HANA is a certified enterprise geodatabase, so that makes it really easy and gives us web services and APIs to access. We can then provide this out as configurable mobile field apps that Esri provides, or as a self-service, or set up crowdsourcing, or enable trends and insights, digital twins. There's even little tools there and open source code available to do mixed reality type of things like AU Geo. Is one of those. Click again. And we can bring these also services from an SAP side into this mix. So we have SAP provides geocoding and navigating services, searching and validation. Both SAP and Esri provide global searching and validation by addresses, corner of streets, etc. And then there's the SAP HANA Spatial Services, HSS. Next. Which looks like this. Click once more. These are the current HANA Spatial Services provided as part of the HANA platform. The first two there are basically real-time services, so wildfire API and weather API. So for example, when Australia was having the wildfires ravaging the Australia there, these were streamed through the wildfire API as point data. So basically there's a web service called API call where you can put in a date range and an area you're interested in, and that will then give you the streaming real-time services that you can either put into as a layer on your map or use it for analytics, analytics that you do, or as a data set or anything like that. Similarly, weather API has over 28 different attributes like temperature, wind, rain, snow, all these kinds of things that you can look at any time, whether it's real time right now or what happened 7 days ago. So these can be quite excellent tools for helping you to look at your core data in context of the spatial reference in the right time in the right areas. Surface API is about changes on the vegetation that we can see and what's changed in the last month in a certain area. Earth Observation API is contour changes, so when land contour changes, it's potential that underground things might be affected, so that would be a good place to send some field workers to check it out. There's some additional mapping APIs, points of interest search APIs. Click once more. The Object Detect API is a special one that was created with the yellow rectangular circled things, model API and labeling tool API. So these two are specific ones that allow us to create additional APIs and services using your data that you can either provide to your customers or for internally for your analytics use or whatever. And an object detection API is one of those things that was created using these tools to prove that it works. Next, please. And then on the bottom there are the like data store based stuff. So there are address directories and geocoding directories and location microservices that use TomTom data, land information, New Zealand data, New Zealand Post data, all that kind of stuff. These are products that you will have to. There's a cost involved on these bottom ones, but they might be worth looking into. Next one, please. So this slide we put together for specific reasons. There's a lot of questions around GEF, which is the SAP's main way of accessing space. So the questions tend to be around when to use GEF and when to use Esri's JavaScript APIs. So we put some things together. I validated this with the US guys, but this is a moving target, things changing constantly. So currently, to integrate GEF, you do it if you have a lot of business processes, you have an identifier-based, really clever rules on identifiers, fixed identifiers, things like that on your data models. You have workflows in place. You need to call ABAP to do some specific rules, things like that. Then it makes sense to use, the business and logic workflows with Jeff. If you use purely, if you just want to view things or do simple notify, redlining or editing, you'd probably be better off using the JS API because that has all those tools already built in. They are in GEF as well, but it depends on what works better for you, what's easier from your usage perspective. If you are synchronizing data between spatial and non-spatial databases, you can use FME or Python or Esri interoperability or GEF. Next one. So recommendations is to use GEF if you don't have any Esri licensing, you have to use GEF. There's no ask. So any other GIS system there, open source, anything else, you have to use GEF. If you need to integrate the mapping with other SAP products than the ones that aren't using web browser yet, then you have to use GEF, or then you use GEF. If you need to have the complicated workflows, as said, or any legacy SAP products. If you have Esri Enterprise license and you're using all the latest versions of SAP and Esri products, so you're basically using more and more the web browser-based interfaces, or you need to integrate mapping with SAP products or spatial ETL processes, then you're probably better using JS API. 3D viewing stuff is all by the Esri's JS API. GEF doesn't currently support viewing the data in 3D. HANA does support it. So in HANA database, you can store the data in 3D, actually in 4D, which gives you the time series as well. Next, please. So how do we help you decide whether the SAP Esri story is the right story for you? There are two different programs there. This is the front slide. Inside the slide stack, there are another 2 slides per program to explain it a little bit better, but it would take me half an hour to go through those, so I'm not going to. But there are 2 different ways. There's a discover program and there's a execute program. The discover program is about running a 4-week no-cost program there to try to tease out whether this will be something that might be useful for you to use. The execute program is a 2 to 3 week assessment on looking at what you have in place there and coming up with a plan, possibly a POC, to see how these things could be done. So, for example, we've done this with other organizations where we run the program and basically looked at the data that is there and how ready it is for this kind of integration, and how much work would be involved on getting your data into a HANA type of spatial enterprise geodatabase system enabled for Esri and all that kind of stuff. So we, ZAG, are the local specialized partner to help you do this. SAP is involved, of course. Esri is involved on at least on the first one there, typically. So these programs might be worth you looking into a little bit more. Next, please. And on that, I'm handing it over to Barry.
As he desperately looks for his unmute button. Thanks, Matty, and thanks, Sam, very much for your time. But yeah, obviously, I think if we just look back at what is the core theme, it really comes down to the question I get asked on a very regular basis. How do we bring data together across the enterprise, unlock the business data and the spatial data? And very much spatial is becoming a key conversation. I'm having multiple conversations both in New Zealand and in Australia, where I spend a lot of my virtual time as well, on exactly this topic. So showing these various patterns. So we feel that there's a lot of benefit in unlocking that data and bringing these two worlds together. And as Matty pointed out, there is a team here locally ready, willing and able to help with facilitating that process. So absolutely keen to help out in any which way we can. I don't know if any questions have come through on any of the chat.
No, there hasn't been. So we probably weren't quite clear on that. So you have a Q&A button there and a chat button there. I mean, we don't really mind which way you want to do that. But if you have any questions, just put it through there. Also, if you want to do it in talking, we can do that. We can enable you sort of as a panelist, and that will allow you to talk if you prefer to do it that way. But yes.
But if we just go to the last slide, yeah, look, I think it's just a case of making you all aware of the various contact details there for each of you to reach out either to myself or the ZAG team, or obviously whilst Scott Campbell's name is the one written there, Sam that did the presentation today on behalf of Eagle, you can reach out to either of those guys, and I'm sure that they can provide help as required. But I think other than that, we pretty much have completed, I think, everything we intended to. And what we will be doing is sending a slide pack out afterwards and making it available to everybody as a recording as well. So you can freely rewatch. And Sam mentioned too that we have run this twice already, and the first two were public sector specific, and the second was utilities. So we've got these additional presentations that have a lot of the content's similar, but of course we have some examples that are more specific to the public sector or utility industries, if that's the area that you're interested in. So that's it from me. I don't know, Matti or Sam, have you got any?
Yeah, it does look like folks are going to let us easy this time and not ask any questions at all, which is maybe we're getting better at this. And
answering the FAQs as we go, because yeah, I think we went over 10 minutes last time with the questions that came through on that one. But yeah, again, they're captured in the recording anyway.
Cool.
Awesome.
Okay.
No other questions. We will wrap it, and thank you everybody very much for your time, and give you back 5 minutes of your day as we get to the middle of the week.